Hello and welcome to the weekly newscast by First Ukraine. My name is Victoria Zabian and we're ready to present you news for outgoing week. This week, Ukraine remembers events connected with annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation, beginning of military invasion of Russian troops to Peninsula, political preconditions and reaction of Ukrainian and Russian authority are gathered in the following story by Georgy Spasokotsky.
The active phase of operation on Crimea annexation by Russia began on February 20, 2014. The battles between police and demonstrators in Kiev were still going on. Viktor Yanukovych hostilely fled first to Crimea and later to Russia. Meanwhile, in the Crimea, Russian forces surrounded the local parliament, and the armed men took control of the building. Ukrainian Secret Service and police didn't react anyway. The new Ukrainian government, at a meeting on the National Security and Defense Council, heard of reports of the head of the Ministry of Defense and Security Service of the concentration of Russian troops in the Crimea and on the borders of Ukraine. Concerning the threat of the full-scale Russian invasion, it was decided to refrain from military action in Crimea. Yanukovych and his environment knew that it would be annexation of Crimea. That's why there they were taking the stolen money. Therefore, Yanukovych fled by helicopter to Crimea. In our special services and government were working Russian agents who had been preparing for years the annexation of Crimea and its occupation. Such a scenario they tried to play on Donbass and the south of Ukraine. In early March, all Ukrainian military bases in Crimea were blocked by Russian soldiers without insignia. Kiev turned to the Western partners for the defense from Russian invasion, but Putin denied the participation of Russian troops in the occupation of the peninsula. Ukrainian bases are blocked by people in Russian uniforms. Are they Russian soldiers? Look at the post-Soviet place. In every store you can buy this form. So are they Russian soldiers? You can go and buy a form. They are local self-defense forces. While Putin has denied the presence of his military on Ukrainian territory, they seized office buildings, airport, all the key points. Are you Russian or Ukrainian military? We are Russian soldiers. And what does Russian soldiers on the territory of Ukraine? Why are you asking stupid questions? Aren't you watching TV? Ukrainian military were ordered not to shoot, and at the Belbek airfield, unarmed Ukrainian pilots walked toward Russians to the strains of the Ukrainian anthem. Colonel Mamchur, who led the way of the column, was taken by Russians to the military prison. During 3 days, he was talked around to betray his motherland. Finally, in late March, he returned to Ukraine. On the March 16, the occupational authorities conducted an illegitimate referendum supervised by Russian troops. The international community condemned the annexation. United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution supporting the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The consequences of aggression for Russia have become international sanctions and expulsion from the G8.
Today we have a guest in our studio with whom we are going to discuss Crimean question today. Alexandra Alisa-Novichkova, Secretary of the International Coalition for Human Rights in Crimea and Senior Lecturer at Political Science Department of Kyiv Mohyla Academy. Nice to meet you here.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
And first question is, were these events predictable for Ukrainian authority, and did it make everything to avoid it?
Actually, the question of prediction is the tricky one, because on the one hand, now we find ourselves in the situation that there were signs which were significant and they might give hints. On the other hand, I do remember all this process of these like polite green man in Crimea, and the absurdity of this situation when everybody knew where they're from, and nobody knew what to wait from them. So I remember that one of the parts of the activities of Euromaidan SOS, I was active volunteer at the time, was going to Crimea and streaming everything that is happening there. And it was clear that something is going wrong, and it might be even a military conflict, but it was done everything to avoid that. And on the other hand, nobody was able to predict that it will be the annexation. The more likely scenario was like Transnistrian scenario or Abkhazian scenario. There were no beliefs that Russia will annex Crimea.
I mean that does common mood in Crimea corresponds the event that happened there? I mean, citizens who live there and these officials in Crimea, can they accept so easy the Green Man's and the Russian invasion?
Actually, it wasn't spoken about Russian invasion. It was spoken about Russian intrusion, and there were beliefs that the Green Mans, they are the Russian soldiers. We had this supportment, and later on Vladimir Putin himself, he certified that these men without insignia, they were Russian soldiers. But on every press conference at the time, it was a denial that all these green men without insignia, they are not Russian, they are self-defense, they are locals. As for local mood, it's need to be said about Crimean identity, that Crimean identity is the primary identity, and then they are Russian-speaking Ukrainians, Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, Russian-speaking Russians, or Crimean Tatars. Primarily, they are Crimean. And the referendum itself, it was a tricky question about autonomy. There were no question about joining Russian Federation during the referendum. That's why it's not about the joining or expressing free will, because the free will was expressed Crimea to be autonomous. And the point of entering of Crimea to Russian Federation was voted in the Council of Federation, not in the Crimean Parliament. That's why it's the annexation. The second point, that the referendum wasn't like the fair one. It wasn't well prepared. If you compare to the referendum in Scotland, the referendum was prepared for 4 years and not 2 weeks as in Crimea. And moreover, if we look upon the results of Ukrainian elections of 2012, Aksionov's party was only able to get less than 4% and wasn't able to join the parliament of Ukraine. So it was a weak party.
The next aspect of this topic that I would like to discuss with you, it's not the territories which were annexed, but the state of human rights in on this territory, and how people live under the control of Russian authorities. So we have a brief material on this topic. And situation with human rights in occupied Crimea becomes worse and worse. It is stated by experts of all world movement, Amnesty International, in particular Crimean Tatars are discriminated more than other categories of people. What happens in reality and what measures are taken? Watching the following story by Anna Bilaeva.
European Parliament calls on Russia to start a dialogue with Ukraine on the return of control over the peninsula and stop political repression. This was stated in the European Parliament resolution approved on February 4 on human rights in the occupied Crimea, which was supported by 80% of MEPs. Ukrainian human rights activists claim that for the moment in Crimea in custody, 8 people are illegally detained. 3 of them, Ahtem Chaygos, Mustafa Dagirmanji, Ali Asanov, are in the so-called case of February 26. They were recognized as political prisoners by Russian human rights organization Memorial. Recalling that after the annexation of Crimea, the occupational authorities started a trial on Crimean Tatar activists who 2 years ago took part in action in support of territorial integrity of Ukraine. Moreover, Afanasyev, Kolchenko and Sentov were also recognized as political prisoners. Russian court blames Ukrainians in terroristic activity on the territory of the occupied peninsula and sentenced them to 7, 10 and 20 years of imprisonment accordingly. To get an information on human rights in late January, to the Crimea arrived mission of the Council of Europe, which held more than 50 meetings with representatives of all sectors of society. European Parliament recognized the unprecedented level of human rights violations in the occupied Crimea. MEPs considered unacceptable an abduction and torture of Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians and anyone else who disagrees with the annexation of the peninsula. Direct responsibility for that crimes is on Vladimir Putin, says Lithuanian MP Petras Auštrevičius.
President Putin, you keep lying to the whole world. As a chief commander of your little, polite and green men, you bear your personal responsibility for those who disappeared or were murdered since 2014 in Crimea.
February 11 in the occupied Crimea, searches in the homes of the Crimean Tatars were conducted. Occupation authorities of the peninsula announced the detention of 4 persons within a criminal investigation into the activities of terrorist organization Hizb ut-Tahrir. Instead, Majlis called those searches the wave of repression against the Crimean Tatars. Few days later, the so-called prosecutor of Crimea, Natalia Poklonskaya, submitted to the Supreme Court of the Crimea a statement on the prohibition of Majlis and its recognition as a terrorist organization. In turn, Rifat Chubarov said that the ban of Majlis is another step in Moscow's intention to complete the displacement of the Crimean Tatar people from Crimea.
The threat impends upon thousands of people. We can only imagine the level of such threat. We don't exclude direct repressions in form of detentions of Central Majlis members, and we understand that significant number of members of local Majlises would be displaced from Crimea.
Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemns the decision of Crimean occupation authorities to recognize the Majlis of Crimean Tatars people an extremist organization and to ban it on the territory of the peninsula. Mariana Betsa, the spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, called its intentions a continuation of Stalinist repression.
As it is known, human rights is exactly your topic in the Crimean question. So how can you comment briefly all these events, all the situation around the human rights in the peninsula?
Now we speak about gray zone in Crimea. The problem is that according to Ukrainian and international law, Crimea is the occupied territory. According to Russian Federation law, Crimea is the part of the Russian Federation. So if there are any events occurring at the territory of the peninsula, the question is rising how to get there and who can get there. If you flew from the Russian Federation from Moscow to Simferopol or Sevastopol, you violate Ukrainian and international law. If you go via Ukrainian border, you might have later problems with Russian Federation. There are few examples of Russian human rights defenders who are trying to get to Crimea according to Ukrainian law, and that's the hell of bureaucratic procedure, because you need to be personally present in Ukraine, you need to get documents translated into Ukrainian, you need to personally to submit them to the Migrational Service of Ukraine, etc., etc. That takes at least 3 days. And if there is some emergencies, if you need ad hoc way to Crimea, there is only way to go via Moscow. And that arises the question of the information about Crimea. Not only the human rights defending information, but as well journalists' information, the general awareness of the situation, and the ad hoc reaction. And we are trying to establish the easiest situation to get to Crimea and to establish the general position of how you can get to Crimea, what is acceptable way to Crimea in the case of emergencies. And as well, the recent delegation of the European mission of the European Council to Crimea, they went to Crimea through Moscow. According to Ukrainian law, they are violators, so they should get administrative liability. But the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself, he told that, okay, that's acceptable, that's an exclusion. And we came to the situation, there is a law and there are exclusions, which is not acceptable.
I see. And I have quite a philosophical question for you. Why Russian Federation acts in this way in Crimea? Because it undermines the point of view that citizens of Crimea feel themselves better with under the Russian authority than under the Ukrainian one. So how can they avoid the critics further?
They cannot avoid critics, but they don't agree with it. For example, the report that made the ODIHR Institute for Democracy and Human Rights of OSCE, they presented it in October 2015, which was made out of open sources materials, which were published mostly by Crimean, Russian and international journalists, which was called by the Russian Federation mission to OSCE as over 100 pages of lie. Mm-hmm. And they were open sources, and nobody knows what's truly going on in places with restricted access. It's not only the courts and the detention centers, it's as well mental facilities or prisons or children's home. So what is the position of our coalition? That's the assurance of international presence in Crimea, the monitoring mission, which will monitor the procedures. So there were at least trying to prevent cases of torture or unhuman behavior or mistreatment of the person who were arrested.
Well, activity of coalition is not only connected with people who are political prisoners.
Not only with people who are political prisoners, because some of Crimean people who were eager to join Russian Federation, they haven't lived there, and they don't have this. They have this idea that they manifested, they went out to the streets, and that's why they joined Russian Federation. No. If you analyze the film Russian production Crimea Way Home, mm-hmm. you can clearly see that it was the political will that returned Crimea home.
I see. And one more important aspect in this topic is international reaction on all these events, and all civilized world is deeply concerned with Russian aggression and annexation of Crimea, as they state, but practical resolution of this problem connected only with sanctions provided by against Russian authority. And at the same time, Ukraine is trying to find the ways how to discuss the issue of Crimea. What is the international reaction around the annexation of Peninsula? Watching the following story.
Insolent annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation provoked a deep disturbance from the side of progressive states and international community in common. In several days after the illegal referendum that was organized in Crimea in order to confirm the desire of peninsular citizens to separate from Ukraine, Ukrainian Parliament Verkhovna Rada has adopted a declaration in which it encourages members of international community to abstain from the international recognition of so-called Republic of Crimea and annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation. Crimea was, is and will be Ukrainian territory. Ukrainian people never will stop fight for liberation of Crimea, no matter how long and hard it would be. In 1 week after the adoption of this declaration, UN General Assembly adopted the Territorial Integrity of Ukraine resolution, in which it was underlined that referendum on Crimea and Sebastopol has no any legal force. 100 states supported the resolution, 58 abstained and 11 voted against. In particular, territorial integrity of Ukraine was not supported by Belarus, Bolivia, Venezuela, Armenia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Nicaragua, North Korea, Russia, Syria and Sudan.
Many still struggle to grasp the reality. It happened in Ukraine, in the very heart of Europe. It happened in the 21st century.
We've always said that Russia had legitimate interests in Ukraine. It has been disheartening in the extreme to see Russia carry on as if Ukrainians have no legitimate interests in Crimea, when Crimea is a part of Ukraine.
Despite of the support of Ukraine by progressive states, the Russian Federation ambassador called that voting as a victory for Russian diplomacy. Also, annexation of Crimea was supported by a camp of unrecognized Abkhazia, North Ossetia and Nagorno Karabakh.
Even though this resolution, which we opposed, was adopted by the General Assembly, I think it's a moral victory for the Russian diplomacy, because an increasing number of countries is beginning to understand the complexity of the situation and the motives behind the actions of Crimea and the Russian Federation.
Representatives of Western states claim that sanctions against Russian Federation would be enhanced, that provoke further economic and political isolation of Russia. Exactly, annexation of Crimea was the reason for excluding Russian Federation from G7 group. But despite of the international pressure on Russian Federation, Russian officials stay categorical concerning Crimean question. For Russia, Crimean question is closed forever. There is nothing to discuss. There are referendum in Crimea. We changed our constitution, and Crimea will stay a part of Russian Federation forever. Nevertheless, Ukraine is continuing to seek new ways for discussion the Ukrainian future of Crimea. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko announced the new format of Crimean liberation discussion, Geneva Plus, with participation of US, EU and possible states which signed the Budapest Memorandum. I'm assured that optimal format for international mechanism on returning of Crimea is Geneva Plus format, with participation of our European partners, USA and maybe states that took part in signing of Budapest Memorandum. For now, international community pays attention only to human rights violation in the occupied peninsula, and practical ways for the occupation of Crimea had not been developed yet.
Well, there is some feeling that international community is concentrated mostly on military conflict on the east of Ukraine because it's not finished yet. So Crimea is considered as a finished topic from the point of view of Russian Federation. So are some discussions on Crimean question are possible in theory, at least?
Okay, it's closed for Russian Federation. To a certain extent, it's not closed for European countries, for international community. But with the migration crisis in Europe, with the Syria crisis, it's not the headline topics. Okay, there are violations of human rights in Crimea, but in comparison with the ongoing conflict in Syria and with the ongoing military action on the east of Ukraine, it's relatively calm, smooth, etc., etc. And let's focus on more important topics. For example, we have a crisis in Europe. Mm-hmm. That's why it's very important to constantly remind that there is a conflict, there is a problem with the human rights in Crimea, etc., etc. Moreover, with the migration conflict in Europe, there are voices that say we need to limit certain human rights. as limitation of freedom of speech, limitation freedom of assembly, limitation of that, limitation of those, and the world isn't the same as it was before the conflict, before the Budapest Memorandum was broken. It's really a huge issue, and those who do understand it understand that Crimea and Ukrainian situation in a whole, that's the front line of the conflict against European civilizational values and traditional civilizational values.
I asked about the possibility of discussion of Crimean question because on the eve, Petro Poroshenko talked about the new format for discussion.
Geneva plus
format. Well, on your point of view, is it possible to attract Russian Federation to such kind of discussion? Or we should continue Minsk process and then to add some new points about Crimea, about human rights? And
saying Geneva plus 4, it's about the status of Crimea. As like a political scientist, I can say that you can have a lot of discussions and conversation and concerning with the Russian Federation, but for Russian Federation this point is closed, and you need to apply more pressure on Russian Federation so Russian Federation understands that the Crimea is not a closed question. And at the same time, there are people in Crimea, and a lot of them have refused Russian citizenship, and a lot of them were willing to refuse, but they have no opportunity because it was a very close period and with very limited places, and you need to really make an effort to renounce your new acquired citizenship. With such acquisition of citizenship, it had no precedent in the past because they became Russian citizens automatically despite their will. What concerns me as a human rights defender, that's the question of human rights in Crimea. And if we speak about occupation, deoccupation, appartenance of the Crimea to Ukraine or to Russian Federation, often we speak about territory and we forget about people. And I think for Ukraine it's very important to focus on the people, because if we start an action in Crimea to return Crimea back home to Ukraine, I can't give 100% that after military action people in Crimea will support Ukraine and they will be willing to return to Ukraine. It's more important to focus that Ukraine is still caring and still protecting, despite any obstacles, its citizens in Crimea. And what we can see right now, very controversial laws.
Yeah. And Crimean question also touched the art life in Ukraine, I mean Eurovision contest. And so Crimean Tatar singer Jamala will represent Ukraine on the Eurovision contest in Stockholm. This time, Ukrainian contester will sing a song exactly about deportation of Crimean Tatars from the peninsula by Stalin in 1944.
This way, favorites of national selection to Eurovision supported each other before the beginning of selection at the backstage. Andriy Zaporozhets and Jamala had a real interrogation from the judges after their performances.
Today we saw the performance where the song is one story, staging is the other story, and the dress and appearance are the third story. These three stories do not contact and are not combined.
Jamala's performance was the most carefully discussed by jury. It was noticeable that singer holds back tears. Andriy Danilka calmed the contester.
участвовать в этом конкурсе,
It is necessary to be a fighter in order to take part in this contest.
нужно быть бойцом.
Presenter carried the singer in his arms from the stage because a week before the final, Jamala tore a ligament on her leg, so she had to sing through the pain. But she said that it was not the most difficult thing. Not all are sure that Europe needs a song about deportation of Crimean Tatars under the title 1944.
Andriy Danilko said that he was confused by the title. I named the song 1944 by intent so that foreigners ask the question, what happened in 1944? And I was successful because a lot of people and many international media asked me about this story.
Jamala was born in Kyrgyzstan, in the city of Osh. Her grandmother was from deported Crimean Tatar family. The flowers embroidered on singer's white dress represent the story of her family.
My dress today is very unusual because it is work of Rustem Skibin. He is famous painter and sculptor. There are flowers. Flowers symbolize my family, people, women. Rose is a young girl. Almond is a symbol of mother. Carnation is a symbol of wisdom and even maturity. It is symbol of grandmother. That is why I can say that here is illustrated my feminine story.
Здесь, можно сказать, проиллюстрирована вот эта вот моя женская история.
33-year-old Jamala finished the Academy of Music on opera singing. Her favorite singer is Maria Callas. Singer says that 60% of a day she's listening to music. Parents of Jamala live in Crimea, where 1944 song is heard practically everywhere.
Of course, it is so positive story, but of course we're interested in political aspect of this topic. So, in your point of view, should Ukraine sing such kind of topic in the international contest, and whether it is important for us to win or to show our position to international community?
Okay, there are several points. Eurovision is a highly politicized contest.
Already, yeah.
It was and it will be. The second point is its important message, and if Ukrainian people choose Jamala to represent Ukraine with such a song,
they already.
Yes, so that's the fact. So yes, she should sing this song. And the third, it was worth for the reaction of Russian Federation, because in my opinion, it was hasty and I don't know, not really mature reaction, because that's the fact. The deportation of Crimean Tatars, the deportation of Chechen and Gush in 1944, a deportation of a lot more Crimean minorities as Gagauz, Armenians, or Karaims to Asian steppes, and the reaction was, you should prohibit her to sing this song. That means you should prohibit that memory. And that's the manifestation of what is really mean Crimea for Russian Federation. That's a prohibition of the part of Crimean memories, not only the Crimean Tatars memory. I think that the fact that somebody from your neighbor was taken away, that means okay, it might be that you'll be the next, and that leads to the terror. That's one more step to support the terror. And the reaction was, okay, it wasn't important, but that's human lives, and it was important.
I see. Thank you very much for your visit. We discussed a lot of interesting aspects of this Crimean question. Thank you for your visit.
Thank you for the invitation.
Our guest was Alexandra Novichkova, Secretary of International Coalition for Human Rights in Crimea, Senior Lecturer at Political Science Department of Kyiv Mohyla Academy, and we discussed situation around annexation of Crimea by Russian Federation 2 years ago. Situation in the ATO zone stays stressful. Positions of Ukrainian army are under the fire of terrorists permanently. And more details about military actions on the east of Ukraine, watching our following story.
In the area of anti-terrorist operation, fire clashes with Russian separatists continue. Near Yasunuvata on February 24, terrorists fired with mortars the police post. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops at Avdiivka took control of the industrial zone from where terrorists fired the city with mortars. It is a private sector of Avdiivka. Upon these buildings, terrorists shelled from the industrial district with mortars of caliber prohibited by Minsk agreements. Now we are approaching the industrial zone, which recently was taken by our soldiers, and have a look what's the situation there. The fighting in that area don't stop for the day. The open area must be run from cover to cover. Let's go. It is the beginning of the industrial zone. Then there are separatists. We control the entire industrial area, but further, where the gardens are, half of it under terrorist control. We are always under fire from machine guns and grenade launchers. They stop fire only when the OSCE observers arrive. From the separatist side fight the mercenaries from Russia and Russian regular units. At the Ukrainian positions are also citizens of other countries. My name is Grigory. My call sign is Jew. I am citizen of Israel. I am fighting for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. I came to Maidan to help doctors. Then began the aggression in the east. In the 2014, I went to Aidar battalion. Since then, I've been fighting. I filed for Ukrainian citizenship. Now I am waiting for the recommendation of the Ministry of Defense. The main thing is the spirit, and we, Ukrainians, keep it.
Just as the ground, a military band played the fighters of Separate Guard Mechanized Brigade outdoors. In Rivne region, a concert performed at the army men who served in the ATO zone in the east of Ukraine. After rotation, they returned to the musical band. This week, press conference of foreign ministers of Germany, France and Ukraine took place in Kyiv. The main topic for discussion was elections on occupied Donbass. Visit of diplomats is the preparation to meeting in Norman IV format, which will take place in Paris on 3rd of March. Frank-Walter Steinmeier and Jean-Marc Ayrault underlined that Minsk agreements must be executed and election on the east must be provided. Head of Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs Pavlo Klimkin said that Kyiv is ready to execute its promises concerning elections, but only if it is assured in fair result.
We are talking not only about Donbas territory as it is, but first of all about Ukrainian citizens there. Not only constitution changes should not legitimize those who are authorities there and those who had court authority as a result of fake elections. Exactly this kind of logic of constitution changes is important in the framework of Minsk process. Both France and Germany know that electoral law is one thing and the preconditions of all these elections are another. However, we should take care of both issues, and of course, the security issue could not be an excuse for not working on electoral law.
Chief editor of Inter TV channel Citizens of Russian Federation Maria Stolarova was deported from Ukraine. The reason is her anti-Ukrainian position and her actions that threaten sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. This week, when during the story about people killed in Maidan, Maria Stolarova said that it is time to finish this rubbish in dirty words. It is to be recalled that she visited terrorists on the east of Ukraine and made photos with them. Her Facebook is full of anti-Ukrainian posts and statements.
Based on materials concerning Russian citizen Stolярova Maria Lvovna, it was established that activities of citizen of the Russian Federation Stolярova Maria Lvovna contradict to the interests of national security of Ukraine, its territorial integrity and sovereignty of the constitutional order. It was resolved to return forcefully across the Ukrainian border the citizen of Russian Federation Stolярova Maria Lvovna, born on 7 September 1980, with her further prohibition on entry into the territory of Ukraine for the period of 3 years.
Occupation Authority of Crimea has prohibited Ukrainian journalists and Crimean citizens Anastasia Ringis to enter the peninsula till 2020. It was reported here at the checkpoint Jankoy. The message about prohibition to enter was announced by representatives of Federal Security Bureau. Anastasia was born in Hurzów and her parents live in occupied Crimea. She went to visit her father in hospital. He was operated on the eve. 15 people died as a result of double terroristic act in the capital of Iraq. Near 50 people are wounded. On the eve, terrorists attacked the city district of Baghdad. First bomb exploded in mosque, and when the people gathered at the place of terroristic act, the second bomb exploded. Nobody took the responsibility for terroristic act yet. More about events in the world, watch the following material by Valeria Bagrantsova.
At least 4 massive explosions were heard in the south of Syrian capital, in the Shiite neighborhood where is located one of the most sacred places of Islam. The victims of attack were more than 80 people. Dozens are badly injured. Earlier in the air took off 2 mine-studded cars in the city of Homs in the west of Syria. Human rights activists reported the death of more than 50 people. The responsibility for all that attacks took the Islamic State group. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad accepted the truth plan for his country agreed by US and Russia. It shall enter into a force on 27th of February. Terrorist organizations, including Islamic State, are not subject to plan's operation.
In the last days, Russia has sent its special envoy in the Syria issue to Syria to talk to the Assad regime and to make sure that they are in agreement to move forward in the diplomatic process.
67 suspects in involvement of ISIL terrorist group facing Turkish court in Istanbul. According to investigators, they have relation to the Turkish branch of Islamic State. Suspects were arrested last year in July after the attack near the border with Syria. Among them are citizens of Turkey, France, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Syria, Colombia and Libya. Will the United Kingdom remain the European Union member? The agreement between UK and EU makes the country stronger within the Union. This is official position of the head of British government, David Cameron. Having agreed all his proposals in Brussels, the Prime Minister began campaigning for the EU membership.
I've spent the last 9 months setting out the 4 areas where we need reform and meeting with all other 27 EU heads of state and government to reach an agreement that delivers concrete reforms. So we wanted new protections for our economy, to safeguard the pound, to promote our industries, including our financial services industries.
The issue of withdrawal from the European Union divided British society into a half. Now that there is no unity within a leadership of ruling party, some conservatives in parliament also cannot listen to their leader. The first out of Britain's politicians who made a stand against was the mayor of London, Boris Johnson.
The trouble is with Europe that is being very greatly eroded, and you're seeing it more and more over employment, over border controls, over human rights, over all sorts of stuff. And you've got a supreme judicial body in the European Court of Justice that projects down on this entire 500 million people territory a single unified judicial order from which there is absolutely no recourse and no comebacks.
In 4 months, Kingdom will hold a referendum, and Cameron has promised to convince everyone to vote for a further stay in the Union. 106 years old Virginia McLaurin made to dance the US president. She dreamed to get into the White House and met with her idol Barack Obama. She even recorded a video request. Indifferent people handed it to the White House, so the old lady got appointment with the president. The woman personally met Barack Obama and his wife Michelle. Virginia was so amused that she got down to dancing and even joined the couple to dance.
Ilya Yemets, the cardiosurgeon of Ukrainian Children's Cardiac Center of the Ministry of Health Care of Ukraine, was the first started successful operations on newborns with complex heart defects in Ukraine practice the plastic surgery on the valves of the heart of infants. Walls first introduced the prenatal diagnosis and surgical treatment of complex congenital heart diseases in the first few hours of life in newborns with the use of autologous cord blood instead of donors. Physicians, Ukrainian Children's Cardiac Center collaborated with leading Swiss specialist clinic treatment program for adult patients.
An important focus of the Centre's international cooperation, conducting joint consultation analysis of the most complex patients using telemedicine technology, exchange of experience and internship programs, all of the highest value of the life and health of the patient.
59-year-old Anatoly suffered a myocardial infarction. In serious condition, he was taken to the cardiology center. Endovascular surgery lasted 2 hours. The doctor, while constantly communicated with the patient.
Regarding this patient is 59 years old. He is male who 2 months ago, or approximately 2 months ago, was brought to us by ambulance with myocardial infarction. Dr. Levis, he is one of the leaders in the specialty in the world, and he comes regularly to our clinic approximately once a month. He stays once a week, and we made with him approximately 60 or more than 60 operations together.
Ilya Yemets was the first started successful operations on newborn with complex heart defects in Ukraine, practiced the plastic surgery on the valves of the heart of infants, created the neonatal cardiac surgery school in Ukraine. Pierre Lewis, one of the world's leading cardiologists and co-founder of Centre Endovascular Surgery and Interventional Cardiology Swiss Clinic. In the capital cardiology center, together with Ukrainian doctors, he successfully operated on 60 patients.
Trying to help young cardiologists and surgeons to improve their work. So we have been asked to come to Kiev, and we came here, and we cannot go everywhere. And here we have a very good team, and we decided that this will be one of the most important tasks for us to help them to improve their job.
On the symbolic tree of life, the heart of thanks from patient-centered adults and children. They write their wishes on little paper hearts. We wrote a big thank you for much a good job that they do for our children. So little good in this world, and they are good doctors, and they are good for kids. The center also collaborates with the Swiss Medical Foundation, Heart of Eurasia, led by cardiac surgeon Professor Paul Vogt. The result of collaboration with the Foundation Center began a joint project of creating an international medicine institutions at the Ukrainian Center of Cardiology, which provide care to patients from Europe and Asia.
It was Weekly Newscast by First Ukraine. Victoria Zabian was working for you in the studio. Take care and goodbye.